Masechet Moed Katan Daf 27. We continue laws of Avelut, beginning with the overturning of the bed. Tenor banan holech makom lamakom im yachol lema'et bisko yema'et v'im lav yegalgel imahen. So actually, one law before that, if someone is traveling on business, and he hears that a relative passed away, so he should minimize his business. We saw in general that one should not work while one is in mourning, because you should be concentrating on thinking of the loss. For if it's a hefsed midobeh, significant loss, then one is allowed to do some work for other relatives, not so much for parents. This person, because he's on a business trip, so it seems that would be a significant loss. He paid for this trip and all kinds of other expenses, and he's there. And so if he can, he should try to minimize. If he cannot minimize what he's doing, it's just, it's impossible. So then he can make some kind of partnership with the other people he's with. Maybe he's traveling in a caravan with some other people that are in the same business. And so if they pool together their resources in that way, he's just joining together with them, and he can rely on their doing some of the work, and that way it's a little better than doing all the work on it for himself and on his own. At what point do we overturn the beds? Which is a general way of asking, at what point does avelut actually start? When the person dies, then the relatives are onanim, and then at some point they transfer the status to avelim. So, and that is symbolized by overturning the bed. And answer number one is Mishiyaseh mipetach beto divrei Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua Omer mishiyisatem hagolel. Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is when they close the opening of the cave. Golel is called golel because it rolls, and they didn't always bury in the ground like we do today, but rather in a cave. It is still basically under the ground, and so they would deposit the body and then close it, and then at that point they're officially avelim. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yoshua said, that's Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer says once they leave the house. In other words, when they take the body out of the house where he died. So Rabbi Eliezer says, according to that, avelut starts earlier. Rabbi Yoshua says it starts a little bit later. And here's a story. Rabban Gamliel, the elder, died. And as soon as they took him out of his house, his body out of the house, Rabbi Eliezer, following his own opinion, says, okay, now time to turn over the beds immediately. Then when they took him to the burial cave and they closed up the rolling stone, then Rabbi Yoshua says, now you should overturn your bed. So no, we already did it. We already overturned the bed. Based on the elder meaning Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkinos, right? The famous one from the Avan Avachnai story, the one who had some tension with Rabbi Yoshua, who told him Lo b'shamayim he. So that's these two. Rabbi Eliezer is older than Rabbi Yoshua. Now the Rabban Gamliel is much older. Rabban Gamliel Hazaken would be 2 generations before that, and so this might actually be a mistake and actually be referring to the Rabban Gamliel of Yavne. That's the second Rabban Gamliel, and he was a older contemporary of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, and so it makes sense that he would have died during their lifetime. In fact, the Talmud Bavli tells us the story of how he died when Rabbi Eliezer prayed because Rabban Gamliel had excommunicated him and so on. And so that would be interesting if then the Rabbi Eliezer comes and also gives instructions at his home when he's the one that prayed for him to die. Okay, it's not clear if we should put together all the different stories about these sages. But anyway, there are 2 manuscripts that do not have the word zaken. There are 2 Sephardi manuscripts, pretty good manuscripts. On the other hand, the vast majority of manuscripts, including a Yemenite one and a Geniza fragment, do have the word zaken. So perhaps this happened early on in their careers when they were Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua very, very young, and they were still around when Rabban Gamliel Hazaken died. So it is definitely possible, and then actually that would make it more reconcilable with the other stories about Rabbi Eliezer causing the death of Rabban Gamliel. All right. Tenora banan. Mematay zokfin et mitot ba'id of Shabbat. Okay, now we overturn the bed when people begin to mourn. Then when Shabbat comes, there's no public mourning on Shabbat, which means people are going to be coming over and all that. So they have to make the beds upright on Friday afternoon. Oh, so when should they do that? From mincha time, either mincha gedolah, mincha ketana, right? A couple of 2.5 hours or so before Shabbat, they should already start preparing and put the house back together. It says, never, even though we're making the beds upright a couple of hours before Shabbat begins, the mourners, no one should be sitting on them on it till it gets dark. In other words, they are still technically in mourning until Shabbat starts, so they should be sitting on the floor, wherever, until Shabbat begins. Once Shabbat begins, then they can sit normally on the regular beds. And then once Shabbat ends, they should overturn the beds again. Even if the Shabbat is their 6th day, and then Sunday would be the last day of their Shiva, which means they'd only be sitting for a few minutes on Sunday morning. Nevertheless, they have to overturn the bed to reflect that we're going from Shabbat to a weekday. We are back in mourning mode, and even if it's only one day, a few minutes, one overturns it again. Okay, there's an interesting Ramban here that says, well, if you, you also the whole night, wouldn't they be sitting it on the whole night? And Ramban infers from here that it would be possible actually to sit just for a few minutes at night, Saturday night, because that's the 7th day. The night starts in the day starts in the night. So one could sit a few minutes on Saturday night and that's it, get up. You don't have to wait until the morning to sit for a few minutes. So that's an interesting Ramban. Halacha is not like that. Okay. Note that Tosafot says nowadays we do not do this overturning of the beds for various reasons. One of them is our beds are not made the same way as they were made before. Would be kind of doesn't make sense to be sitting on the opposite side of an upside down bed. And so we don't do that nowadays. However, we do something instead, which is Avelim do not sit on regular chairs. And that's not mentioned anywhere in the Talmud that we would sit on a low chair or cushion or anything like that. So basically, instead of overturning the bed, nowadays, that's what we do. We sit either on a cushion, on the floor, on a mat, on a low chair, things like that. Okay, these halachot remind me of when someone does pass away. So someone calls the chevra, the misaskim, and they come, and sometimes they come immediately, even before the burial, which reminds me of the opinion here of Rabbi Eliezer that sometimes as soon as they call, already they're preparing from the day before, and then the question is when should they come and pick everything up. So these are relevant, not exactly the same way of overturning the bed, but in the equivalent of what we do today. Here's another difference between what we do today and back then. Someone who overturns his bed, not only his own bed should he overturn, but also all of them in the house. In other words, not just that the mourner should not be sitting in a comfortable way. It's also a symbol that you walk into the house. You says this is a house of Avelut because you see all the beds. They didn't usually sit on chairs. They had benches and stools, but they didn't have chairs the way we do today. So you go in and everything is overturned, and that really shows their minds or their lives have been overturned. And so you do it with all the chairs in the house, and that'll be very dramatic. And if he has 10 beds in 10 different rooms, maybe in another house, so sometimes he says one house he stays, sometimes he stays in another house. All of them are overturned. Even if there are 5 brothers and one dies, and each of them have their own homes in which and that they live in, that they're sitting in, then they overturn all of the beds in all of the homes. We're going to see a couple of exceptions. If it's a bed that's used for storage, sometimes people have like an extra bedroom, and the bed there they put clothing on it, or they put other things on it, just used for storage. No one ever sleeps on it. So then that already became like like a table or a chest, and so you don't have to overturn that one. Something called a dargash. We're going to see two opinions about what this is. En sarich lichpoto. It's a bed-like item that you do not have to overturn. Ela zokfo. Rather, you could just set it upright, and that's sufficient. And it's not usable. That's Tanakama. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Dargash matir et kar bitav, hu nofel me'etz me'elav. No, instead of making it upright, just loosen the loops, and then it will fall down on its own. It has some kind of loops and some kind of contraption, and then it will fall down. It's not clear who is mekel and who's machmir. It would seem easier just to pick it up on its side, but maybe some kind of heavy item, and maybe it's easier to undo the loops. All right, now we want to know what this item is. My dargash, amarula arsa degada. It is a good luck bed. Sometimes I would have an extra bed somewhere in the house that was ornamental, like like a day bed people have in their living rooms that are uncomfortable to sit on. It's just there for show. In this case, maybe it's more like kiseh shel Eliyahu, where no one sits in that chair. Eliyahu comes. This is good luck. So people would have in their home some kind of good luck bed. And since no one actually sleeps in it, and it's not constructed in a normal way, and therefore you have to do something for it, because it is a kind of a sleeping bed, but it's not a regular bed. Okay, so now we're going to bring a few challenges to Ula and ultimately reject his definition. Challenge number one: when a king is in mourning and it's Pesach, so then everybody will be on the floor, and the king, it's not nice for him to be on the floor. He will recline on this item, this dargash. Now here's the question: is there anything that a person would not normally do, but now that he is a mourner specifically, he's going to do differently? And if you think of dargash is a good luck bed, so no one, the kings and no one else ever sleeps on a dargash, and all of a sudden you're going to say now, well, you're in mourning, but it's Pesach, so now lay down on the dargash. We wouldn't use the dargash now if we never used it. Okay, we're going to answer that question by saying matkif la Rav Asher. Rav Asher is going to reject the question here of Rabbah. Well, my question, what kind of question is that? Midi dehava achila ushtiyad adaidana la ochilne vela ashkine hashta ochilne vashkine. A lot of things that we do differently on for a mourner than one he would do normally. For example, eating and drinking. Until now, we do not feed him or give him to drink, right? Especially a king. King eats of his own. Most people eat of their own food from their own money. And all of a sudden now, when someone's in mourning, then the community, relatives, they come and bring food for him. So that's an unusual thing to do. So too, maybe a king would now do an unusual thing, and so it could be a good luck bed that is never used normally, and the king would use it. So this is not really a question. Okay, rather, if you're going to ask a question, here's a better one. Okay, a Mishnah that we just read said that you do not have to, or Braita, actually, it was a Braita that we just read, says that you do not need to overturn a dargash, but rather turn it upright. Well, if it's a sleeping bed, if it's a good luck bed, so then why not? After all, that is still a bed, even if it's a good luck bed. We just learned this source that when one overturns the beds, he overturns all the beds. So a good luck bed is still a bed, and therefore should be overturned completely. So that's the second challenge to Ula, that it's a good luck bed. And then we reject this also. My kushya. It's not true. Not all beds have to be overturned. Just like a bed that's designated for storage does not have to storage that you put clothing on it, whatever. But just like something for storage does not need to be overturned, even though it is a bed, so too, so there are some beds, if they're not used for sleeping normally, then they do not need to be overturned. So you have a perfectly fine definition that Ula gave, that a dargah is a good luck bed. And that's why it does not need to be overturned in the normal way. Okay, third try. This will be a charm. Ella ki kasha hakasha. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer dargash matir karbita v'hu nofel me'elav. So in that same braita, Rashbag said, this dargash, you don't have to make it upright, but rather you loosen the loops and then it will just fall on its own. So you don't have to go through the trouble of overturning it altogether. It will disassemble if you take out the loops. But a good luck bed doesn't have loops. We don't know exactly what these look like, but apparently they did not have loops, and so Rashbag cannot. And Rashbag assumes that it does have loops, therefore it cannot be a good luck bed. Good luck beds do not have loops. Dargash does have loops, and so therefore we reject that opinion altogether. And we have now a second opinion. Ki ata Rabin amar le'ahu Rabbanan, Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava Shemer. Rav Avin came from Eretz Yisrael, and he quoted in the name of a sage who was Rav Tachlifa from the west, from Eretz Yisrael. So it makes sense Ravin, who's from Eretz Yisrael, would deliver this tradition. And he was often in the leather market. So he knew about this. It's a leather bed. There you go. Okay, so it is in fact some kind of bed, but it's a leather bed. It's constructed differently than most beds, and this now this makes more sense. Dargash has its loop, its lacing from the inside. In other words, like this. When you lace this the leather on it, you use these ropes and you do it right through the bars on the side, right through the frame, whereas a regular bed does not go through the frame but around the frame, and so that's a difference in the way that they are constructed. And if you say it's leather, then it solves all the problems that we had before. Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, halacha k'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. We follow halacha that you have to undo the bed, those loops, and you cannot. It's not enough. It's not good to simply put it up on its side. Itemar nameh, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, Amar Rabbi Aseh mitashe nakliteha yosin sokfa vedayo. On the other hand, a tent bed, a canopy bed. We don't have a picture here, but you know what this looks like, right? It's a bed and it has two posts, one at the head and one at the foot, and then you would put a tenting on it. So because it has those two posts, you can't overturn it, right? The posts are in the way. So in that case, you can make it upright on the side, and that is sufficient. So you see here that the point of overturning it is not simply to sit on the other side. This you wouldn't be able to sit on the other side, but rather to show that we are not going to rest in a nice, comfortable way, but rather that everything in our lives is now overturned. Good. Another halacha about this. Tanur banan yashen al gabe kiseh, al gabe ud yane gedola, al gabe karka lo yasa yedei chovato. Amar Rabbi Yochanan shelo kiyem kefiyat hamita. And here's very interesting. Even if one sleeps on a chair, not comfortable, or on an overturned mortar like a stool and sleeps there, or sleeps right on the floor, he did not fulfill his obligation to overturn the beds, because Rabbi Chia says he has to physically, he did not fulfill overturning the beds. So the point is, it's not just about being uncomfortable, right? That's going to be part of it. If all the beds are overturned, he's not going to have a nice, good sleep in a regular way. But in addition to that is the symbolism of actually overturning all the beds in the house. או מדיחין קערות וכוסות וסלוחיות וקיתוניות בבית האבל. ואין מביאים את המוגמר ואת הבשמים לבית האבל. Another braita, one can sprinkle water to, they had dust floors, so they would sprinkle water after you sweep, like a clay tennis court, right? After you broom it, you have to sprinkle water on it. So you can do that. That's the way to make the floor nice. So even though it is a bet avel, people are coming over, and so it's appropriate to make the floor look nice. And You can also wash the bowls, cups, jugs, pitchers in the house of a mourner. People are coming and they're eating and drinking. So that's all fine, but you do not bring incense and spices into the house of a mourner to make it smell nice, which one normally would do when you have guests over. But Bet Avel, even though guests are coming over, it's not a place of enjoyment. Hold on, we have a contradiction because another Braita says that you do not say a beracha on the incense besamim and besamim in the house of Avel. It just says that you don't say a beracha, but that implies that you would bring it. Because if you don't bring it, if you don't bring it at all, it should say don't bring it. Then obviously you're not going to say a beracha. If you don't say, if you're saying don't say a beracha, it implies that you are bringing it. No, it's different. One is in the Bet Avel. Bet Avel seems like the place where the Avel himself is staying and sleeping on his own. So there one should not bring anything at all. Bet Menachamin is where the Avel goes, that room where he's greeting other people. In that case, you can bring Besamim, because there's lots of people there, and so to be more inviting to them, one is permitted to bring some bisamim. Some say this is the opposite. We're going to see in a few minutes that when there's the body of the deceased is there, one may have spices because the bodies didn't smell good, didn't have refrigeration or anything. So there, one is allowed to have spices, but that's once the person is buried and they're only coming to visit. That would be the Bet Menachamin. Then no spices would be allowed, and that ends up being the opposite conclusion of this one. And Molichin lebet Havel. Next Mishnah says, Lo betavla velo beiskult la velo bekanon ela besalim. Or when the visitors come and bring food to the Bet Havel, it'll be the first meal or all week long. People want to honor them and make them feel better and bring food. So they should bring food, but they should not bring it in a fancy way, not in a tray called a tabla, not in a bowl, not in this narrow mouthed basket, but rather sal, a regular basket, be in a cheap way. Okay, back to Chol HaMoed. Finally, when someone does a burial on the holiday, for sure Chol HaMoed, maybe Yom Tov also, we do not say Birkat Avelim like we would normally do when we say this nowadays during the special Birkat Hamazon. For the Avelim, Baruch Menachem Avelim, but we do stand in a line to greet and give words of give words of nechama to the mourners after the burial, and then we tell everybody go home. In other words, we'll make a quick burial because it is the holiday. You can't wait till after the holiday for the burial. So you do a burial and you do the beginnings of the normal ritual, and then you tell everybody, okay, now go home and enjoy the holiday, have your regular meal, because we don't want people to be involved in a funeral all day long on a holiday. And normally, when there's a funeral when there's a burial during the week, we put the coffin in the middle of the market, and everybody will come and visit and say words of eulogy. And even when they are taking it to the cemetery, they would stop every few minutes because they don't want to show they're in a rush, and like the Spanish Portuguese do till today. So that's done in a regular weekday. But on the holiday, we do not do that. We do not leave it out. We do not stop and leave it in the middle of the street, because we do not want there to be eulogies. Eulogies are not allowed during the holiday. And we do not put the bodies, corpses of women out in the street at all, because it is dishonorable. Seems something to do with that the body may be bleeding, and it's not honorable. The Gemara will discuss this further. Okay, Gemara. Teno Rabbanan. בראשון היו מלכים בבית האבל, העשירים בקלטות של כסף ושל זהב, והעניים בסלי נסרים של ערבה כלופה. והיו עניים מתביישים. התקינו שיהיו הכל מביאים בסלי נסרים של ערבה כלופה מפני כבודן של עניים. So it used to be a long time ago that the people would come to the Bet Avel, and the rich people would come and bring their food in baskets of silver and gold. Poor people would come with just peeled willow branches, baskets made out of those. And so then the poor people were embarrassed because they're looking, they come and they look like, like they don't care, like they're nothing, embarrassed in front of the rich people bringing the gold and silver, and then they didn't want to come and visit the mourners. And so the rabbis made a takana: whenever you're coming to a Bet Avel, everyone should bring the simple baskets made out of willow branches, so that everyone will feel equal. It's not a time to be showing off, right? How rich you are, how much you care, as if if you bring gold and silver, you care more about the mourners. So that's not the time and place for that. That's when they would bring food in the baskets. When they would bring drinks, then the rich people would bring in white, some kind of fancy lalik jugs, and the poor people, they could afford is the colored ones. I would think the colored ones would be more expensive, but apparently the white ones were very special. And the poor people were all embarrassed. So the rabbis made a decree: everyone, when you're bringing drinks to the mourners, only in colored glasses. This is very interesting. At first, they would have an open casket funeral for rich people. They would reveal the face of the rich people, and that everybody would come and say, "Oh, look!" They would increase people's mourning to actually see the face. And for poor people, they would not. They would cover the face. Why? Because the faces of the poor people were darkened by famine. Right, when there's when someone has lack of nutrition for a long time, their skin turns dark, and so they were embarrassed to show that their loved one looks so terrible. They would not, but the rich people, they looked, they could show off how beautiful they looked, how healthy they looked. And so the rich poor people were embarrassed. So they made a decree: no open caskets, everybody should be covered, so that no one feels bad. First, they used to take out the bodies of rich people in this dargash. So it's not a normal bed, but it's some kind of a stretcher that was fancy. And then poor people, they would bring just in a very plain old stretcher. And they were embarrassed. And so they made a decree: everyone should be taken out on a very plain stretcher, so that no one would be embarrassed. But חיים מתביישים, התקין שיהיו מניחים תחת הכל, מפני כבודן של חולי מעיים חיים. So first they would put incense under anyone who died and had intestinal disease, because that would cause a smell, and so they wanted to cover up the smell of the deceased. When those who were alive who had some kind of intestinal disease, they would see that, they were like, "Oh, I smell so much, look at the bodies, look what they have to do," and they would be embarrassed. So they said, "You know what, we're going to make incense for everybody. All bodies that die will have incense with them, so that those who are alive and may have some intestinal disease that causes them to smell will not feel bad." בראשונה, היו מטבילים את הכלים על גבי נידות מתות, והיו נידות חיות מתביישות. At first, if a woman died while she was nida, so they would go and bring all of her vessels that she used before she died and bring them in to put them in the mikveh, because she was nida. In other words, they'll see that from her body that she was nida, and then they'll go ahead and do that. And then all the women who were nidot were embarrassed. They're like, if I die now, people will know that I'm nida. It's a private matter. And so they just seeing that, they made them feel embarrassed about being nida. So they said, you know what? anytime a woman dies, we're going to go and take all her vessels and put them in the mikveh, just in case she was nida, maybe she was, maybe she wasn't, but it's nobody's business to know. And so it's done by everybody. Okay, same thing for men. If when they saw the body, the man that died, and so he was a zav, so he was tameh. Everything that he had was tameh, so they would go and dip in the mikveh all of the vessels that he used, and then men who were alive or were zav, they were embarrassed. So they said, you know what? Doesn't matter. We're gonna, anytime anyone dies, woman or man, we're gonna dip everything that all their stuff, and no one needs to know whether they were nida or zav or zava. Nobody's business. This is an amazing testimony that it used to be that the taking care of the dead was more difficult for the relatives than the death itself, right? One thing is that they lost a loved one, and now they would come and say, oh, here's the bill, right? You have to pay for all the funeral expenses and the shrouds. You have to pay this huge amount, and they were more upset, more distressed over the bill than they were the fact that they lost their loved one. And it was to such an extent that when people couldn't afford it, they would just leave the body there and run. They would just abandon the body so that they wouldn't have to pay for the expenses of the burial. A terrible situation. Until Rabban Gamliel came and he said, listen, when I die, I want you to treat me lightly, treat me like a nobody. And he was buried in linen garments, and he did that himself. To show it's perfectly fine, and then everyone used just linen garments, even if they were important and rich and they could afford more, because otherwise you make it unaffordable for people, for poor people. It says nowadays everyone practices this, and not even linen, even hemp garments that cost just a dinar. They're very cheap. That's what we use. Until today, this is the custom. The burial shrouds are made of just like it's canvas material, very cheap. It doesn't matter who it is, and the coffin itself, we just use regular plywood, very cheap coffin. In our cemetery also there's a standard height for the stone that you can use. No building high stones, mausoleums, anything fancy, and it doesn't matter who it is, the poor person or the richest person in the community. They have the same same expenses, and of course anyone who can afford it, the chevra covers the expenses. And so this is a very important lesson that we learned from this Talmud that is still practiced until today. And manichin et hamita barechov. Okay, Mishnah mentioned that on Chol Moed, even though you do have a funeral, you do not put the body down in the street so that people can eulogize over them, because we don't want eulogies during the holiday. But there's an exception. If it's a great sage, then there is no holiday for a sage. In other words, even if it's Chol Moed, we put the coffin down and we do say words of eulogy, even on Chol Moed, and all the more so Chanukah and Purim, because we can't just let it go by and let the person be buried with nothing, right? People have to learn and be inspired from the example of the Tamid Chacham. But that's only when the body is actually there. Afterward, the body is buried already, and then we do not make eulogies, only for the honor of the body when it's there. But otherwise, we would not make eulogies, even for a Tamid Chacham on the holiday. Ini contradiction. Rav Kana gave a eulogy for Rav Zevid, who was from Nahar De'ah, while Rav Kana was in Pum Nahara, so he was in a different city. He heard that Rav Zevid died, and he gave a eulogy not in front of his coffin. Amara Papi, Yom Shemu'ah Hava uchebefanav dameh. It was the same day, and being the same day is as if he's in his presence. So that day that he died, even if it's not physically in the presence, temporally it's at the same time, and therefore one is allowed to make a eulogy. If it's not in front of him, it's not that day, then don't do it the next day on Chol Moed, then wait till after the holiday. Amar ula hesped alev dichtiv al shadaim sofetim. Now, even though the word hesped we use generally as just he's giving a eulogy, the technical term is an act that one would do is for mourning, which is beating one's heart or beating one's chest. That's was something that people used to do when they were in mourning. Tipuach beyad, kilus ba'regel. Whereas tipuach is another thing. People would mourn and go like this, whoa, woe is me that they lost their loved one, and they would slap their hands. And kilus is when one slaps his, when stomping on the ground. So you can just imagine an ancient funeral that everybody, they had professional wailers wailing, and you had some musical instruments playing dirges, and people were pounding their chests and stomping on the floor, and the kind of the noise of that would rile everybody up to feel deeply the tragedy of the loss. If you're going to do this kilus here and stomp on the ground, do not use a sandal, but rather a proper shoe, because sandals are not don't give so much protection, and they might fly off, and then you're going to stomp on the ground and hit something sharp, and therefore don't do that. We give the same advice now to grooms, that when they break the glass, they should use their heel and not just the soft part of their sole, because it has happened that the glass has gone through and then they had a hard time dancing. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Avel kevan she'ana rosho shub emenachamin rashain leshebetz lo. Rabbi Yochanan is an important lesson. Don't bother the mourners too much. When the mourners, it gives a nod to his head. In other words, he bows down a little, saying thank you for coming. Then that's it. You're not allowed to stay there and hang out, extend your stay. That's it. You get up and say to Nachum Shamayim and leave. Okay, I mean, the mourners are sometimes overwhelmed with a lot of people coming, so don't be insulted when they say thank you for coming. All right, you made your visit. Everyone has to stand up when a nasi walks in, except for when the patriarch walks in, except for someone who is mourning and someone who is sick. Right, and this would apply to other people too. If the rabbi walks in, right, everybody has to stand up, but someone who's sick, you can't expect them to now have to stand up, right? And the rabbi is coming to visit the chole, make him feel better, not to make him extend himself and stand up. And Avel also is permitted just to stay seated. Let's say you're the nasi or you're the rabbi and he's getting up, right? The Avel is getting up. You should not tell him sit down. If anyone else, if a rabbi walks in, because I can sit down, mochelan kavod. But when you Avel, you don't say sit down, because in that you're implying I want you to sit longer, right? May you continue to be an Avel. We don't want to say that. Similarly someone who's sick, you don't if he's trying to get up for you. He's trying to honor you. You don't say stay down, right? As if you're saying stay sick. So rather, you just say, no need to bother for me, relax. But you don't say it in a way that might imply that you're wishing bad upon him. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Avel Yom Rishon asur lechol lechem mishelo. Midamar lechaman licheskel. Lechem anashim lo tochel. Avel is not allowed to eat from his own food on the first day. After all, Hashem tells Yecheskel, when his wife dies, do not eat do not eat the bread of men, and that indicates that mourners do have to eat the bread. In other words, you Yecheskel, you cannot practice mourning. That was his special. Even though your wife is dying, everybody else does. So for everybody else, they must eat the bread of other people who bring it. Rabban Rav Yosef, if they ever were both mourners at the same time, they would simply switch their meals. All right, one would provide meal for each other. I guess they didn't have others to provide meals for them, and this was a simple way of solving both of their problems. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Met ba'ir kol bnei ha'ir asurim b'asiyat melacha. If someone dies in a village, Nobody in the village is allowed to work until the body is buried. Point is, we want everybody to be involved and a lot of things that need to be done. And so that way, if no one's working until it gets done, then you'll be sure that they'll prepare for the dead soon, and then they can go back to work afterwards. Now we have a story about this halacha. Rav Hamnuna went to this place called Darumata. Shema kol shipura de shachba. He heard a shofar being blown, indicating that someone in the town had died. He's walking around. He sees people doing work. They're working in the field. They're working in the store. He says, I'm going to excommunicate you. You're going against this law that I've said. You should go and get involved in making sure the burial happens and not work. Don't you know that there's a dead person in the town? Didn't you hear the shofar? You're excommunicated. They told him, no, it's okay. There's a chevra kadisha here in this town, and they are already designated. They're already on the job. They're taking care of it. Since there's someone that we know is responsible taking care of the burial, everyone else is allowed to work, and that's why nowadays also everyone can work, because we know that if there is a chevra in the town. So if that's the case, I released the excommunication. You can go back to work. Very amazing, because until now we've been talking about the importance of taking the mourning very seriously, but now we say there is a limit. Anyone who grieves excessively over his dead, he will end up having another reason to grieve. Another relative of his will die, and he'll have to cry more. There was a woman once in the town of Rav Huna, and she had 7 sons. Another story about a woman and her 7 sons. One of them died. Okay, poor woman. We understand she's very, very sad to lose a son, but she was grieving excessively. And Rav Huna sent to her, stop doing that. She couldn't bring herself. She was just too distraught. She didn't listen to him. Mutav ila sebita zavdata leidach mit. A harsh word says, if you listen to me, everything will be okay. If you don't listen to me and continue to cry and mourn excessively, then you're going to have to make preparations for another death. Prepare shrouds for yet another son. Well, sure enough, she couldn't control. Mitu kulehu, all of 7 sons died. Then he said, prepare for yourself, prepare provisions for yourself, shrouds for yourself, and she died also. Okay, poor woman. What's the reason? We'll see here. Right? Weep not for the dead. Now do not bemoan him, meaning not too much. It's appropriate level. In that case, she's a mother. She has a lot to live for. She's got to take care of her other son. She can't remain in a state of total depression for her whole life. So there's one has to mourn, and then afterwards one has to be comforted. Right? Do not bemoan him more than is the allotted amount. 3 days, it's appropriate to cry. Cry a lot. Get it all out. 7 days for mourning. That's including the 3. Ushloshim, the gihut to spot it, and then it becomes successively lighter. 30 days, no pressing iron in clothing and haircuts. If a person continues to have a severe grief after that, then Hashem will tell him, what are you? You think you're more merciful than me? I gave these commandments. This is my decree that this is a person's time. And so, yes, of course, you have to mourn for the loss, right? That just as it is important to mourn for the loss, so it's important to recognize Hashem is merciful, and this is the way it is. Accept it, and then move on with the world of the living. Bechut bacho laholech. Same pasuk in Yirmiyah continues and says, "Weep sore for him that goes away." What do you mean laholech? Where's he going? Amar Rav Yehuda laholech belo banim. If someone dies without children, then one can cry even more because that person has no one to succeed him, and that is more sad than when a person dies who has children. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi la azal lebe abla ela leman de'azel bela bene. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, in fact, would not go to a mourner's house. He had he was learning Torah, he was involved in other things. But if someone died without children, he would make a point of going to that Bet Avel to comfort because they need a lot of comfort. Tichti bachu bacho laholech ki lo yashub od v'ra'a et eres moladeto. Right, weep sore from that goes away, for he shall return no more to see his native land. So this understanding is referring to not having anyone to return, not having someone to uphold the legacy of that person. And so Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi would go to part of the mourning, visiting the house of the mourner is to have a memory, remember the dead. There's no children to remember this person, so that's why it's even sadder, and he would go for that. That's one interpretation. A second interpretation of this pasuk is Ravuna Marzeh Shavad Avera V'Shana Ba. What does it mean? Someone who laholech ki lo yashub, someone who doesn't avera and he does it again, and lo yashub, he does not make teshuvah. That person is not going to see the world to come. He will not see eres moladato, and so therefore, it's talking about one should be extra sad for someone who is a regular sinner who has no chance of coming back. Rav Huna leta'ameh. So this Rav Huna, he follows his own opinion, which he says more broadly, as he says, once a person does transgresses once, and then again it becomes permitted to him. We ask, does that mean now really he's permitted? You only get one strike, and now from now on it's okay. He's off the hook. Rather, in his own mind, he treats it as if it's permitted. First time someone goes eats a ham sandwich, right? He feels guilty about it. And the second time, then he just gets used to it. He doesn't even feel guilty about it anymore. And so that itself is a great danger. And lastly, the mourners also should fear that maybe they might be next. So for the first 3 days, he should consider himself as if a sword is there between his thighs, or some other said between his shoulders. If he survived those first 3 days, so from 3 to 7, he should still be worried as if there's a sword on the corner of the room. So still frightening, not as frightening if it's right on top of you. After that, it's not his home. But when he's going out, you're always looking over your shoulder. It's like there's someone with a sword out to get you, and so he's always worried about it as he goes in the marketplace. This might have been relevant if his relative died from some kind of contagious disease, and so it's around in the house. So yeah, take precautions. I don't know, wear a mask or something to make sure that he won't get it as well. Once time passes, then chances are that he will be okay. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen. Amen.